Well, long time no see. Not everybody. It's been a while. Been a few weeks. Life's been extraordinarily crazy. Um, just to kind of give everyone an update for those that are interested. Some of you may be familiar with my sheepdog. It's made a few appearances in videos here and there. She had puppies, so that's been a lot. And then we ended up adopting another dog. Crazy as that sounds, it was involved in a car accident and broke its leg and had a few other injuries, and the family couldn't take care of it. And then shortly after that, one of my cats got attacked by a coyote and had some serious lacerations and had to have quite a few stitches. So it's just been my house is like an animal hospital right now, on top of all the other things I have going on and working and so on and so forth. So time has been scarce, but here we are back. Um, this is going to be a bit of a recap, but not really. This is the last thing I had started working on before I had to take a little break, and it's going to correlate back to Queen Moo, back to my book series, which I have just about finished part two of, or episode two, I should say, of my Queen Moo audio series. So expect that video tomorrow. But the reason why, and I had a request long ago to do a entire read through of this article, as I just quoted it before. Um, and we're going to correlate this back again to the Yucatan, Central America, America in general, but also the worldwide flood myth and how that correlates with the Maya and the Aztec in that region. So, as you can tell by the thumbnail, the Great Pyramid is Noah's Ark. And I'm going to show you in this video what this author, what conclusions he came to. And I'm going to show you some myth from the Aboriginal or Native American tribes in America who correlate and corroborate this gentleman's same information, that indeed pyramids were built as sanctuary, and in other words, as well as I've shown, that they were also vaults, vaulted doors, in a sense, entrances to subterranean realms. They served many purposes, but one of many. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get into this material here. Thanks again for being here, and it's good to be back. Science identifies the Great Pyramid as the real Noah's Ark. Even the very rooms and tunnels in which the chosen survivors of the deluge took refuge, declared by Egyptologists to have been found at last. Now, um, I've talked about these vaults and these hallways or tunnels that correlate to different um, parts of the zodiac, and that I do believe there was a timer of sorts, and that these floods um, were written in the heavens, either as predictive or as a sign that it was time to exit the subterranean world and that it was safe to return to the surface. Not quite sure which, but I'm sure it was quite related to either of those. Um, Not only was the Great Pyramid, in my opinion, a entrance to the subterranean world, but it was also used for initiation. Um, as not all the people were saved, and but yeah, so perhaps the vents were used um, for air, many other things. But I'll read some captions and then we'll get into the meat of this here. Gustav Dor's biblical illustration of the deluge. Standing on a rock, a few people trying to escape. An actual photograph of the entrance of the Pyramid of Giza, and I apologize. I know these are black and white photocopies essentially, but this is just showing you the entrance into the pyramid. Um, a diagram view of the Great Pyramid showing chambers, passages, and long south air channel reaching above the high water mark. So as we get into this, we'll show that this just channel here, the author of this dissertation shows the salt mark is just a few feet, about 10 feet, maybe a little more, below the highest air chamber. Quite interesting. A passage leading to the king's chamber. And then here we have a diagram of the Great Pyramid showing location of refuge chambers and connecting passages. The dotted lines below ground level indicate foundation limits. Now later on, um, we'll talk about the subterranean worlds found beneath Giza. And I postulated in one of my interviews with Stellium 7 that, the Giza Plateau is quite an amazing place. It looks like it's been cut with a laser, the whole plateau in itself. And I've made the correlation that if you go far enough back into old maps, it looks as if Cairo is surrounded by giant tree stumps that don't exist, or that ground level has been brought up significantly higher. I've even gone as far as to say that perhaps these old maps of Cairo are really Cairo in America. It's hard to say for sure, but these mesa plateaus and the pyramids and their correlations to um, vaults and underground passages is endless. They exist here in America and China, and the Bosnian pyramids become quite relevant. That the similarities across the globe are undeniable, really. But the importance and significance of the underworld, underground, and the deluge myths will correlate again, like I said, with the reading of Queen Mu. So, yeah, let's get into the article here. That Noah's Ark was not a boat or ark at all, but a great stone pyramid, one of those still standing in Egypt, is the extraordinary declaration of a famous scientist, Dr. C. E. Getzinger of the Royal Egyptologist Society. He has just made public the discoveries which he maintains support his assertion. Dr. Getzinger is not seeking to discredit the Bible. He believes that there was actually a great flood like that described in Genesis. He believes it occurred somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 BC, and that it inundated practically the whole known world of that period, the countries adjacent to what is now known as the Mediterranean basin. He believes that many of the human beings and other living land creatures of that period and locality were drowned, and that among those who saved themselves were some who sought refuge in man made structures built for just such an emergency. He believes, however, that they were not arks or boats, but permanently built, immovable structures with their foundations on the earth itself, and that the ark, described in the Bible story, was in reality the Great Pyramid of Cheops, the largest of the Great Pyramids at Giza. He thinks that the Bible story is true in a poetical sense, but that it is an allegory handed down for hundreds of generations by word of mouth before it was set down in writing, and that in the course of years now, and imaginary details were added to the narrative. According to the Bible story of the deluge, which occurs in the early chapters of Genesis, Noah was commanded by the Lord to build an ark of gopher wood, in which he, his family, and two of every species of living land creature, animals, birds, and reptiles, were to survive the general destruction. The following directions were given according to the Bible history for building the ark. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A cubit was about 18 inches, so the ark was to measure roughly 500 feet in length, 75 feet in width, and 50 feet in height. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof. With lower, second, and third stories thou shalt make it. The Bible record records that Noah did as he was bidden, and that after he and his family and the animals were shut in the ark, all the foundations of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. The flood covered the whole earth, and every land creature, except those in the ark, were drowned. After 7 months, the water receded. The ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, and Noah, his family, and the animals emerged to repopulate the world. Here are Dr. Getzinger's claims and conclusions in his own words. Investigations prove that the pyramids, the Noah's Ark Pyramid and others, were under the sea for years. Near the top of each of the pyramids, at the same level, is a high water line where a deep niche has been cut into the rock by the lashing of the surf. Also, the inner passages of the structures show traces of sea salt, so determined by chemical analysis. These monuments were really constructed thousands of years before the reign of Cheops and before the period of Egyptian civilization to which they have generally been credited. All Cheops did was to repair them by covering them with a casing of outside stone. They stand today as a monument to a much older civilization. In the Great Pyramid of Cheops, there are three chambers which correspond to the biblically recorded directions to Noah for construction of the ark against the arrival of the predicted flood. The instructions were: a lower, second, and third story shalt thou make. These three chambers, named by Noah for his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were intended to represent the three strains of life and intelligence. The lower chamber was Shem's to symbolize animals who have no souls. The second chamber went to Ham to symbolize people with lesser intelligence and spiritual attainment. The highest chamber, that of Japheth, symbolized the inspired teachers or spiritual intellectuals with greater understanding. The entrance to Cheops is 52 feet above the ground, so placed that the polar or north star could shine directly into the interior, which it did according to astronomy about 30,000 years ago, and so, after its complete cycle, does again today. I do not conceive that actual animals enter the pyramid or ark. I assume that the so called animals referred to the animal signs of the zodiac: Aries, the ram; Taurus, the bull; Cancer, the crab; Leo, the lion; Scorpio, the insects; Capricornus, the goat; Pisces, the fish. The great flood of Noah's time did not cover the whole earth. It included only the ancient lost continent of Atlantis and Egypt. While Atlantis still remains under the sea, the Egypt the Egypt end arose after years of immersion and was resettled by immigrants from other lands and their domestic animals. Aside from the identification of Noah's Ark and the Great Pyramid, there is revolutionary because it puts the date of the building of the pyramids thousands of years before Cheops, who has been generally regarded as their builder, and attributes them to a lost civilization which preceded the Egyptian. It is known from a thousand different sources that the Egyptians did some building in connection with the pyramids, that they used them as tombs for their kings, and that they claimed them as their own. But as a matter of fact, all that the modern world really knows about the original construction of the three remarkable monuments is the story told by the Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt about 450 BC, a comparatively late period. Herodotus says that Cheops built the pyramid which bears the name, but Herodotus was a credulous and highly imaginative writer who believed fantastic tales that were told to him by others and often embroidered them further with his own fancy. The Great Pyramid of Cheops, which Dr. Getzinger says is the real Noah's Ark, is the most interesting of all the pyramids in Egypt. It covers over 13 acres, is 755 feet square at the base, and about 481 feet high. It has far more inner passages and chambers than any other structure of its kind. The mathematical accuracy of its construction is marvelous. The upper chambers, used as burial places for kings and queens, were completely hidden behind walled passages and were only discovered by archaeologists in modern times. Yeah, so a bit of a quick read, but important. And I do think it was worthy of going back and reading, as I just only quoted it in my previous video. I did a short edit of my interview with Stellium 7 where I focus primarily just on my conclusions and research and looking at old maps and thinking about the biblical narrative and the felling of giant trees and the falling of the vapor canopy and that the destruction of the megafauna and these giant creatures and the giants of the land and all of these things correlate quite nicely, and that even human consciousness can be steered as a starting point from this exact um, apocalyptic type event, this catastrophe. Now, to finish off this video, I'm going to touch on a few other things. Now, I've also mentioned in the past that not only the Ute Indians, the Paiute, Pitaiute, Paiute Indians of the American Southwest, the Utah, Nevada region, have a very similar story to this gentleman. In fact, they, in their own words, say that the pyramids that they were instructed by a strange race who they called a priest class or a kingsley class, not of their race or people, but a advanced civilization, instructed them to build pyramids for the sake of surviving a deluge. Many of the Mississippian cultures describe the exact same thing, but this was written off as simply a way that these were built for people to stand on top of when the Mississippi would flood. Now that's just outrageous. How long could uh, a whole tribe couldn't fit on top of one of these? And if they could, they certainly couldn't live long enough to outlast a flooding Mississippi. And as I've shown through quite a few of my episodes now, that there are vast underground chambers and not just chambers, tunnels, huge areas that connect not only with cave systems, mountain ranges, but also that many of these quote mounds were actually pyramids and that they're all interconnected. Now, back to the Paiute Indians, their story is quite identical. And like I was stating earlier, that the pyramids were built for just this very reason by some advanced race, not of their own. In an article I posted quite some time ago, I talk about a great prehistoric lake in northwestern Nevada. This is from 1916. The previous article that I just read was from 1922. The large prehistoric lake, which flooded a number of the valleys of northwestern Nevada at a very recent geological date, but has now passed away, was named Lake Lahontan, Lahontan, in honor of Baron Lahontan, one of the early explorers of the headwaters of the Mississippi. The lake covered approximately 8,400 square miles. Now it's quite an area, huh? At its greatest expansion, and in the deepest part, the present site of Pyramid Lake. Now, I've talked about Pyramid Lake quite a lot. It was at least 880 feet deep. That is, its surface stood approximately 500 feet. Now, this is important, above the present water surface of Pyramid Lake. The ancient lake had no outlet except the one that led straight up, its water being dissipated entirely by evaporation. A large area a few miles north of Winnemucca is covered with sand dunes formed since the disappearance of Lake Lahontan. The dunes are fully 75 feet thick, and their steeper slopes are on the east side, thus indicating that the whole vast field of sand is slowly traveling eastward. This progress has necessitated a number of changes in the roads in southern part of Little Humboldt Valley during recent years. In some places in this region, the telegraph poles have been buried so deeply that they have to be spliced in order to keep the wires above the crests of the dune. The sand is of a slight creamy yellow color and forms a beautifully curved ridges and waves and are covered with a fretwork of wind ripples. And many of these ridges are marked in the most curious manner by the footprints of animals, which form strange hieroglyphics that are sometimes difficult to translate. Now, this is a really important picture here. This is found on a map from the 1840s describing um, ancient highways or pathways by native cultures from the Mississippi Valley all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Now, this is a pyramid that was marked in 1840. Okay, this is Pyramid Lake, Upper California, which is actually Nevada. Um, Again, the Nevada territory and the California territory, the shapes of them in this era were completely different. In fact, Nevada and Oregon territory extended all the way over to Nevada at certain points. Beyond the point here, but this is what they drew, and as described in this upper article, right? That the pyramid. Okay, they're not describing it, but they're saying that the deepest part at the present site of Pyramid Lake is at least 880 feet deep. That is, its surface stood approximately 500 feet above the present water surface. 500 feet. Now, if we look at this, I know it's difficult to read. This is 1844. Okay, the Pyramid of Rock Lake. Okay, rises 600 feet above its surface, and a 900 feet below the surface. Look at this thing. This is a pyramid rivaling that of Giza, and you can still see the stonework. Incredible. Now, I've talked about this as well in the past, but it's worth mentioning here. The creation myth of the Heliopotan form of ancient Egyptian religion, Benben, was the mound that arose from the primordial waters Nu, upon which the creator deity Atum settled. The Benben stone, also known as the Pyramidion, is the top stone of the pyramid. It's also related to the obelisk. In the pyramid texts, Atum himself is at times referred to as a mound. It was said to have turned into a small pyramid, within which Atum was said to dwell. Other cities developed their own myths of the primeval mound. At Memphis, the god Tatinan, an earth god and the origin of all things in the shape of food in Vienne's divine offers all good things, was the personification of the primeval mound. The Benben stone, named after the mound, was a sacred stone in the temple of Ra at Heliopolis, Anu or Inu. It was the location of which the first rays of the sun fell. It is thought to have been the prototype for later obelisks and capstones of the Great Pyramids were based on its design. Now, why is this important? Because this is the stone in which the first rays of the sun fell. Now, going back through again my vapor canopy works and talking about that these pyramids were arcs, similar to the idea of the dove finding land, right, and landing on its first piece of land, and that this Benben stone, this capstone, was the first part outside of the primordial waters. So this is a pyramid sticking out of the primordial waters, and the first place that the sun's rays hit. For me, this story is echoing to the fall of the vapor canopy. All of these cultures talk about a time before the sun and moon, when there was no sun and moon. This would be your vapor canopy. Again, if these are things you're interested in and you aren't familiar with my material, I would recommend going back and watching my vapor canopy videos, watching my um, excerpt from my interview with Stellium. I clipped that into a clip if you don't want to watch the whole interview, where I show the old maps of Cairo and the tree stumps, or what I call them to be tree stumps, and how the pyramids were built on top of these. I talk a little bit more about the symbolism and the mythology here, but this is really important again. the part of this the rebirth, the Ben stone, the capstone sticking out of the primordial waters where the first rays of the sun fell. So the first rays of the sun after the fall of the vapor canopy touched or kissed this stone. This is a little excerpt talking about again what I had mentioned earlier, that the deluge had been described again by Ute Indians of the Lake Tahoe area. The Great Spirit sent an immense wave across the continent from the sea, and this wave engulfed both the oppressors and the oppressed, all but a very small remnant. Then the taskmasters made the remaining people raise up a great pyramid so that they, of the ruling caste, should have a refuge in case of another flood. Incredibly interesting material here. Pyramid Lake. Um, this pyramid's still there today. I'll pull up an image of it if I can find it quickly for you guys here. Um, but one more thing I want to show, that when we're talking about the Ute Indians of the Paiute Indians, and where the name Utah comes from. I've quoted this before and talked about this in my Anomalous America Utah episode. So if you want more there, go there. But this is just going to be a quick little synopsis of the correlations between the pyramids being built here, the languages, the quote native, the Indians, the people that came before them, as they said in the even the Egyptian lore, that these things were there before their civilization was founded, so to say, and that they come from an extinct race, a race of giants, I would say. The query propounded by our inquiring correspondent is not an uncommon one. Many persons have put the same question to their own minds, and the subposition has been that it was an Indian word derived from the speech of some Aboriginal tribe of that region now known as Utah. But the word Utah is of Egyptian origin and belongs to the hieroglyphic characters of the most ancient speech. From thence it was engrafted upon the Aramaic and the Canaanite or Phoenician dialects. Really important. Again, we're correlating the idea of the pre-Egyptians. Who are the pre-Egyptians? And well, the Canaanite and Phoenician overlays are quite drastic and interesting, especially when we're going to draw the correlations again, why I wanted this video before I got further into my Queen Moo series, and to allow myself to um, think out loud a little bit more when it comes to discussing the correlations between these two cultures. And that perhaps, again, what like the previous author mentioned, that the deluge was the sinking of Atlantis, and that perhaps this Atlantis realm was America. Now, I'm not the first person to say that. Many authors for almost 200 years have been stating that Atlantis was actually America, and that America was sunk in the deluge, and that it took for many years, hundreds, if not thousands, for it to reemerge. There were just mountain peaks sticking up out of the waters. So yeah, so Canaanite Phoenician dialects, and through them was introduced into the Hebrew as their cognate tongue. In the sacerdotal writings of an ancient Egyptians, the word Utah signifies the eye. Now, isn't that interesting? Right now, we've talked about the eye in the Ben stone. Symbolically and fundamentally, they have so many overlays. So, how funny is that? That I don't think that's a coincidence. And as much as a sacred character in the name of the great deity of the Egyptians, Osiris, right? These Osiris myths, okay? Osiris and Isis. These are going to be really important things to remember as we get farther into the Queen Moo book. And that, in fact, these myths and deities were borrowed from the Yucatan, Central America, and America, meaning the strong, the almighty. And for this, the sun was the material representative and object of worship. Again, the sun, the primordial stone, birthed from the flood, kissed by the rays of the sun, the eye, the Ben. This is also kind of, I know it's probably hard to see here, but this is part of what has inspired my representation on my neck here, is that I have a square, but it's a pyramid with the eye inside of it and the sun rising above it. And for this, the sun was a material representative and object of worship. In this connection, then Utah, the eye, stood as signifying the source of light illumination. And as such, the learned men of the Mormons who studied of the antique are well known, have probably given their new and far off territory the name Utah, the source of light. Yeah, the name existed long before the Mormons, but who are the Mormons? And what are the Sephardic Hebraic roots of Mormonism? And how do we trace the golden tablets back to not only Egypt, but the correlation with the Micmac? That's a whole nother episode in itself. I wanted to pull up a dictionary here that shows a bit of the correlations here between the U2 parts of the translations for the hieroglyphics. And just to read a few of these off, because it's quite interesting. You have boat, you have storehouses. Hmm. Right? Okay. So very arc related. Eyes, to weigh or to judge. I mean, to make strong, mighty, safe, sound, intact, to set out, to go forth. The Eye of Ra, priestly official. I mean, there's no coincidence here. We could go all day just talking about who Noah was, the representations of Noah from an Egyptian standpoint, Greek, Roman, trace them all the way back to the Yucatan. We'll cover more of that as we get further into the Queen Mu series. But yeah, important stuff here. Um, a bit of a recap, but very lightly. If you've seen that material, which I doubt few of you even remember it or have. So again, go back and check out my um, Noah's Ark was the gateway. I'll have a link in the description for the video. And yeah, stay tuned. Tomorrow we'll have part two of my Queen Moo book audio series. Will be out tomorrow. It's good to be back, Misty guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. Have a wonderful day, guys, and look forward to the comments here. And thanks again for 13,000 subs. Just broke that the other day. Means a lot. We're going to keep trucking on and keep busting out some more content here. I'm really behind. So, yeah, yeah. Misty, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys.